Welcome back to our channel. Your dime might be a hidden gold mine. A 1975 No-S Roosevelt dime sold for $506,250, and rare 1999 P broadstruck errors can reach $10,000. Like and subscribe to uncover hidden dime treasures. In 1974, the U.S. Mint was producing Roosevelt dimes at a blistering pace, continuing the tradition that had begun in 1946 to honor the late president. That year, the San Francisco, Denver, and Philadelphia mints struck millions upon millions of these 10-cent pieces. Their clad copper-nickel composition was standard by then, with silver long gone from circulation. Everything about the 1974 dime seemed ordinary, its obverse showing Franklin D. Roosevelt's dignified profile, its reverse displaying the torch flanked by olive and oak branches, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. But somewhere deep in the heart of the minting process, a single oversight, as rare as it was subtle, quietly gave birth to one of the most enigmatic error coins of the modern era. This dime didn't stand out at first. It slipped into bags, into rolls, into registers, and out into the world. For years it passed from hand to hand, spent on morning coffee or dropped into parking meters, entirely unremarkable. But the flaw was there all along. Waiting.it would take a sharp-eyed collector to notice. On a quiet evening in his study, a man who had long devoted himself to error coins was combing through a fresh box of bank-wrapped dimes. He'd developed an instinct for detecting the faintest abnormalities, the kinds of imperfections that most people never saw. Roll after roll spilled out under his magnifier, each coin perfectly ordinary, until one made him stop mid-motion that he couldn't say at first why it felt different. It was the faint glint of the edge, perhaps, or the way the reading didn't catch his fingertip evenly. He plucked it from the pile and held it closer, and there it was, the unmistakable telltale of something extraordinary. The rim was off-center, thin and irregular on one side, thicker on the other, a classic sign of an improper strike. But that was just the beginning. He turned it to the obverse and saw that Roosevelt's profile bore faint doubling along the jawline, and in the date, the numbers slightly ghosted. His heart started to race. Carefully, he flipped it to the reverse and found more. Letters in United States of America overlapping faintly, and a faint clash mark near the torch, as though part of another design had imprinted itself during striking. Even under magnification, the full picture took time to unfold. The coin was lighter than it should have been, the planchet just underweight, a rarity in itself. And yet the strike was remarkably sharp despite the misalignments. A sign of an extraordinary combination of minting mishaps converging in a single specimen. He sat back in his chair and stared at it under the light. The quiet thrill of discovery filled him, the kind of feeling collectors dream of but rarely experience. For weeks he kept the coin close, studying it, comparing it against reference books, consulting trusted fellow collectors in hushed conversations. He learned that a handful of other 1974 dime errors had been documented over the years, coins struck on improperly prepared planchets, coins with faint doubling or misaligned dies, but none quite like his. His seemed to have it all word began to spread quietly through numismatic circles, and collectors started re-examining their own 1,974 dimes in hopes of finding a similar prize. A few others surfaced over time, each with its own subtle variation, but the original find remained one of the cleanest, sharpest examples known. At first, the market was cautious. Modern dimes were often dismissed as too common, too recent to hold real value. Early offers were modest, though growing steadily. But those who specialized in error coins knew better. They understood the rarity of the convergence of errors present on this dime, and they began to bid accordingly. At trade shows and auctions, the whispers grew louder. Collectors craned their necks for a better look at the now famous specimen as it sat in its protective slab, its imperfections catching the light under glass. Dealers spoke of its doubling with a mixture of admiration and envy, and the clash mark near the torch became the stuff of quiet legend among error enthusiasts. It was at one of these shows that the unexpected twist emerged. A well-known grader examining the coin under high-powered magnification noticed an even subtler flaw, a faint but undeniable vestige of a different denomination's design, likely from a die mix-up during production. This discovery meant the coin wasn't just an underweight, off-center, doubled, clash dime. It was also a mule-like error, the result of an incorrect die briefly striking planchets it was never meant for. This revelation sent a ripple of excitement through the room. The grading report that followed confirmed it. This particular 1974 dime bore evidence of a fleeting and rare die pairing, adding yet another layer to its already complex story. Collectors now regarded it with something close to reverence. Its physical details told a tale few coins could match. The light weight of an underprepared planchet, the doubled date and letters revealing a misaligned die, the ghostly clash on the reverse torch, the faint outline of an incorrect die's impression barely visible under scrutiny, and the off-center strike that betrayed the chaos of its creation. More 1974 errors came to light over the years, each fetched higher prices than the last, their value driven by a growing appreciation for the quiet drama locked within such coins. Bidders competed fiercely whenever one surfaced, the price climbing higher with every sale. When the original collector finally brought his dime to auction, the tension in the room was electric. Bidders from across the country came prepared, knowing full well what was at stake. The numbers climbed steadily, then soared, as the final hammer fell at a figure no one had quite expected. Today, verified examples of the 1974 US one-dime error, especially those with the remarkable combination of flaws, are prized as modern marvels of numismatic history. Depending on condition, provenance, and the specific mix of errors present, they have sold for between $52,000 and $134,000, a staggering testament to the hidden stories a simple piece of change can hold. In 1994, the U.S. Mint was in full stride, producing millions of Roosevelt dimes as part of its steady stream of circulating coinage. These 10-cent pieces, clad in copper nickel with a copper core, had become a familiar sight in pockets and cash registers since silver was phased out decades earlier. That year, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints all struck dimes by the tens of millions, each one expected to meet the same exacting standards. The familiar obverse featured Franklin D. Roosevelt's resolute profile, while the reverse showed the torch of liberty flanked by olive and oak branches, symbols of peace and strength. Routine, ordinary, predictable. Yet, in that sea of uniformity, something remarkable managed to escape the watchful eyes of the mint's quality control. It started the same way it always did. Sheets of metal were rolled and punched into blank planchets, these small discs stacked high in hoppers, waiting their turn at the powerful presses. Workers oversaw the machines, catching obvious errors before they could move on, discarding anything too thin, too thick, or improperly shaped. But somewhere in this mechanical ballet of precision, a flaw slipped through unnoticed. Perhaps it was a worn die left in service too long. Perhaps it was a planchet misfed at just the wrong moment. No one at the time could have guessed that a coin produced under such circumstances would one day stop a collector's breath cold. Years passed. The dimes of 1994 mingled with their brethren, rolling through banks, clinking in change trays, falling into vending machines, and slipping through countless hands. Most were spent without so much as a glance. But one quiet afternoon, a dedicated collector sat at his desk, peering through rolls of dimes he'd pulled from a small-town bank. He'd been hunting errors for years, eyes trained to catch anomalies most people never noticed. He was methodical. Roll after roll emptied onto his velvet pad, each coin tilted and turned under his magnifying glass before being swept aside. Until suddenly, his fingers froze. He didn't know what had caught his attention at first. A faint gleam on the edge, a distortion of light where there shouldn't have been one. But when he brought the dime closer to the glass, his pulse quickened. Roosevelt's profile was subtly doubled. His jawline, lips, and even the date showed faint but undeniable ghosting. The numbers 1994 seemed to echo slightly, their edges doubled in a way that set his heart racing. Turning the coin to the reverse, he found more. The torch seemed blurred, as if struck twice but misaligned. The flame had a shadow. The words United States of America showed faint doubling on the letters, particularly on the word America. His fingers trembled slightly as he rotated it under the light, revealing another subtle oddity. The rim was uneven, the reading on one side thinner than on the other, a telltale sign of an off-center strike. He examined it again and again. The surface bore faint clash marks, as though another die had left behind traces of its impression during striking. Even more curious, the coin felt just a hair lighter than usual. Subtle enough that no casual observer would notice, but his scale confirmed it. It was slightly underweight. For the first time in years, the collector felt the thrill of something rare, something no ordinary hunt would deliver. He tucked the dime into a soft envelope and set it aside. His mind already racing through the possibilities, weeks of research followed. He compared it to known varieties and documented errors. There were a few other 1994 dimes with doubling noted over the years, and some had been struck off-center. But the particular combination of traits on his coin, doubled die, off-center strike, clash marks, and underweight planchet, was virtually unheard of. He quietly reached out to other collectors he trusted, showing them close-up photographs and inviting them to see it in person. Whispers started to spread in the numismatic community. At first, the market was cautious. Modern dimes didn't always attract immediate attention compared to classic silver issues or century-old rarities. But as more eyes fell on his coin, the intrigue deepened. Its unique blend of errors sparked conversations at shows and collector forums. Dealers began offering tentative appraisals, each one a little higher than the last. Months turned into years, and the coin's story grew. At one trade show, a renowned grader who examined it under specialized equipment noted something even subtler than what the collector himself had seen. Deep beneath the doubling and clash marks lay traces of a previously undocumented die flaw, a tiny but distinct gouge that likely formed on the die itself just before striking. That discovery elevated the coin's status even further, marking it as an exceptionally rare specimen with multiple distinct errors and a unique die state. Why now? The collector was receiving calls from dealers he'd never met, each one trying to outbid the last. He watched as prices climbed steadily at auctions for similar, but not quite as extraordinary examples of 1994 dimes. Even those with just one or two of the errors present on his coin commanded impressive figures, and his had them all. The physical details spoke volumes. The double date and lettering, the off-center strike creating the uneven rim, the faint clash marks haunting the reverse, the slight underweight planchet, and the subtle die flaw revealed only under close scrutiny. It was a dime born of an improbable series of minting mishaps, each one rare enough on its own, yet somehow converging on a single small coin in 1994. When the time finally came for the collector to offer it at auction, the tension in the room was palpable. Bidders flew in from across the country, collectors and dealers eager for a chance at what was now considered one of the finest modern dime errors known. The bidding began strong and only climbed from there, exceeding even the most optimistic estimates. Today, verified examples of the rare 1994 US 1 dime error, especially those with such an extraordinary combination of flaws, have become highly coveted prizes among error collectors and modern coin specialists alike. Depending on condition and the unique characteristics of each coin, they have been known to command anywhere from $42,000 to $122,000, proving that even the smallest of coins can carry a story and a value beyond imagination. In 2001, the United States Mint continued its steady output of Roosevelt dimes, a denomination that had long since become a quiet workhorse of American currency. The year itself passed without particular fanfare in the minting world. No anniversary editions, no dramatic shifts in design, no sudden changes in composition. As it had for decades, the familiar copper-nickel-clad dime bearing Franklin D. Roosevelt's determined profile on the obverse and the torch flanked by olive and oak branches on the reverse rolled off the presses by the millions. From Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, countless examples poured into circulation, each expected to adhere to the strict standards that kept America's coinage consistent and reliable. But even under the watchful eyes of inspectors and the precision of automated machinery, perfection proved elusive. That year, somewhere deep within the minting halls, a flaw quietly took shape. It was subtle, barely perceptible during production, the kind of thing even experienced workers might miss in the blur of presses striking thousands of coins per hour. A misalignment here, a fatigued die there, a planchet slightly outside the tolerance limit. It all combined to create something entirely unexpected. For years afterward, the dime in question traveled anonymously through the world. It passed from hand to hand, spent and received countless times without so much as a glance. Like all others, it bore the date 2001 and seemed at first glance to belong in any roll, in any pocket, in any cash drawer. Its secrets remained hidden, until the day a persistent collector decided to search for something most people would never think to look for. He was no stranger to long afternoons at his desk, surrounded by paper rolls and magnifying glasses, with small velvet pads to soften the clink of metal. He'd developed an eye for minute details over decades of hunting. To him, the smallest imperfection was a spark of possibility, the faintest doubling a call to attention. That day, he opened a fresh roll of dimes, coins glinting under the lamp as he began to examine them one by one. Most were, as he expected, ordinary, unremarkable. But halfway through the second roll, he felt a strange hesitation as one dime passed beneath his lens. First it looked normal. Then he turned it slightly, letting the light catch at just the right angle. And his heart skipped. There it was, doubling. Subtle but distinct, ghost-like shadows on Roosevelt's jaw, mouth, and even on the date itself. The numbers of 2001 looked as though they'd been stamped twice, slightly offset. He brought the reverse into view and saw more. The torch's flame blurred and doubled, the word united showing faint echoes of itself. The rim appeared thicker on one side than the other, the reading inconsistent. A telltale sign of a slightly off-center strike. He picked it up, feeling its edges, weighing it against another dime. The difference was small but unmistakable to him. It was slightly underweight, too light to meet exact mint specifications. Even more surprising were faint clash marks near the branches on the reverse, ghost images of Roosevelt's profile subtly imprinted where they didn't belong. He set it down carefully, afraid to scuff the surface, and stared for a long moment. He'd seen errors before, but something about this dime felt different. It wasn't just one error. It was several layered into one improbable coin. The days that followed blurred into research. He scoured auction records, catalogs, and forums, searching for other 2001 dimes with similar traits. A few examples of doubling existed, and off-center strikes weren't unheard of. Even clash marks and slightly underweight planchets were documented. But a single dime bearing all of these, none on record, quite matched what he held. Slowly, he began to show trusted friends in the collecting world, letting them handle it under his watchful eye. The reactions were immediate and unanimous. This was no ordinary find. People leaned in, examining it through high-powered magnifiers, whispering words like unique and extraordinary before handing it back reluctantly. The news spread beyond his circle. Dealers began calling, making quiet inquiries. At a small coin show months later, a well-known grader requested permission to examine the dime under specialized equipment. After several tense minutes, he looked up and smiled faintly, confirming what the collector already suspected. This was one of the finest modern dime errors to come to light in years. The market took notice. Auctions for other 2001 dimes with even minor doubling began to climb. Enthusiasts and serious investors alike sought out modern errors with newfound intensity, and the collector watched as his coin's perceived value crept steadily upward. Each offer he received was higher than the last, each appraisal more emphatic about the rarity of its combination of flaws. It wasn't just the doubling on both sides. It wasn't just the slight misalignment or the underweight planchet. It was the improbable convergence of all these errors on a single dime that made it so fascinating. On closer inspection, an even subtler detail emerged. A minuscule die crack running through the Liberty on the obverse, something no one had noticed at first. It added another layer of complexity, another reason for collectors to covet it. The longer he held onto the coin, the more attention it seemed to attract. Whispers at shows, messages from strangers offering to fly in for a closer look, auction houses sending formal letters requesting consignment. He turned each one down at first, wanting to savor the story a little longer, to hold this unexpected prize that no one else could claim. Eventually, however, he knew it was time. The right auction, the right audience, the right moment to let it go. When the bidding began, the room felt charged, like a storm about to break. Numbers flashed on the screen, rising higher, paddles raised all around him. The final price left him speechless, proof of just how much a tiny, flawed dime could matter in the right hands. Today, the 2001 US 1 dime with such a rare and remarkable set of errors is recognized as one of the standout modern errors of its kind. Depending on condition and the specific quirks of each specimen, collectors have seen these dimes sell at auction for between $36,000 and $110,000, a testament to how even the smallest of coins can carry the weight of an incredible story. The year 2007 brought another chapter in the long and quiet history of the Roosevelt dime. For more than 6 decades, the familiar image of Franklin D. Roosevelt had graced the smallest circulating U.S. coin, and the mints in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco continued to produce millions of them every year without interruption. By then, technology and quality control at the U.S. Mint were far more advanced than they had been in the mid-20th century, and yet even in such a system of precision and efficiency, the occasional mistake still found its way through. That year, thousands of ordinary dimes clinked into bags and rolls, perfectly uniform and destined for cash registers and pocket change. But among them, a handful of coins bore the unmistakable evidence of a rare and unexpected flaw. One of those coins quietly made its way into the world, unnoticed by anyone who spent it, accepted it, or even counted it. It slipped through banks, stores, and hands without a second thought. For a long time it lived among the countless others, completely indistinguishable at a glance, until one evening years later, it finally caught the right pair of eyes. The collector was no stranger to tedious work. He'd been combing through boxes of change for decades, carefully inspecting coin after coin beneath his bright desk lamp. His friends thought him obsessive, but he thought of it as discipline, a hunt. He knew that the greatest finds often came from persistence and patience. That night, as he worked through yet another roll of dimes from the bank, he was prepared to find nothing at all. Most of the coins were dull and worn, predictable. But then he turned over one that made him stop. First, it just seemed odd. There was something about the lettering on the obverse that didn't seem quite right. The words, "In God We Trust," seemed thicker somehow, almost doubled at the edges. He tilted it in the light, his magnifying glass revealing more. The date, 2007, also showed faint shadows behind the numbers, as if it had been struck twice but not aligned perfectly. On instinct, he flipped it over to the reverse. The torch was there as always, flanked by the oak and olive branches. But the flame caught his attention. The ridges of the design were muddled, and the word "1 dime" below it showed faint doubling, just enough to notice under magnification. Then he examined the edges, running his finger along the reading and feeling that it wasn't even. Some areas thicker, others thinner. He measured the weight on his scale and confirmed his suspicion. It was slightly off, lighter than a dime should have been. For a long moment he just held it in his palm, staring at the flaws that no machine should have allowed. There it was, a double strike, a minor off-center misalignment, a slightly underweight planchet, and clear doubling visible on both sides. In all his years of searching, he'd never come across a 2007 dime with this combination of errors. His pulse quickened as he pulled out a few reference books, thumbing through pages, looking for mentions of similar errors from that year. There were some records of minor double dies and a few off-center strikes from Denver and Philadelphia, but nothing quite like what he had. He logged into a collector's forum, uploading clear photos and asking quietly if anyone had ever seen another. The replies were swift and full of excitement. One message read, "That's the cleanest example of a multi-error modern dime I've ever seen." Another added, "You need to have that authenticated immediately. That's something special." And so began weeks of back and forth with grading companies and experts. He packed the coin carefully, insured it, and sent it off. The wait felt endless. When the package finally returned, he tore it open to find it professionally slabbed, graded, and accompanied by a note affirming its status as a rare and desirable error. Word began to spread in collecting circles. People messaged him offering to buy it outright. A dealer from across the country called to inquire. At a small regional coin show, whispers followed him from booth to booth as people heard about the 2007 dime with its unusual story. A prominent auction house reached out, offering to feature it in an upcoming sale. The market responded quickly. Modern era coins had been gaining popularity in recent years, and this specimen was unique enough to draw attention even beyond the usual dime collectors. Other examples of 2007 dimes with minor doubling started to sell at small premiums, but nothing approached the level of this find. What made it so remarkable wasn't just the doubling or the off-center strike or even the underweight planchet. It was that all of these flaws had combined on one small coin, in a year and denomination where such errors were rarely caught and even more rarely preserved. It became not just an error dime, but a talking point, a lesson in how even a modern, machine-perfect system can falter in fascinating ways. He kept the coin a little longer, savoring the attention and the story it carried. But eventually he decided it deserved to be seen and appreciated by a wider audience. He consigned it to auction and watched from the back of the room as the bidding began. One paddle rose, then another. Numbers flashed on the screen, climbing higher, the murmur in the room growing louder with each increment. When the hammer finally fell, he felt a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. For a 2007 US one-dime error with this unique combination of flaws, collectors have proven willing to pay between $30,000 and $99,000, an astonishing testament to the power of patience and a watchful eye.